Between 1565 and 1815, Spain moved 400 million silver pesos across the Pacific Ocean, from Acapulco, Mexico, through Manila to China and back, every single year for 250 years. In today's money, that's roughly $500 billion, maybe more. We'll calculate it in this video. Here's the question nobody asks. Who built the ships that carried that wealth? Filipinos. Who sailed those ships across the most dangerous ocean on Earth? Filipinos. Who loaded the cargo, maintained the ports, and died by the thousands making this trade route possible? Filipinos. Who got rich? Spain. This is the story of the Manila Galleon Trade, the single largest wealth transfer in colonial history. The trade route that made Spain one of the richest empires on Earth, and the reason the Philippines is still poor today. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how much Spain took from the Philippines, and why they'll never pay it back. Let's start with what the galleon trade actually was. $500 billion, taken from the Philippines over 2.5 centuries. And yes, that's a conservative estimate. Some historians put it higher. What I'm about to show you comes from Spanish colonial records, Filipino historical archives, and modern economic calculations. This isn't speculation. This is documented history. Spain kept meticulous records of every galleon voyage, every peso that moved, every ship that sailed. They documented their own theft, and then they never talked about it again, until now. To understand how Spain took $500 billion from the Philippines, you need to understand what the Manila Galleon Trade was, and why it existed. In 1565, Spain colonized the Philippines, but Spain didn't want the Philippines for the Philippines. They wanted the Philippines for China. Here's the problem Spain had. China produced silk, porcelain, tea, and spices that Europeans desperately wanted. But China didn't want European goods. China wanted silver, lots of silver. And Spain had just conquered Mexico and Peru, which had the largest silver mines in the world. So Spain needed a trade route. Mexican silver to China, Chinese goods to Europe, and the Philippines was perfectly positioned in the middle. Before we go deeper, our goal on this video is to get 500 likes and share your opinion in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. The route worked like this. Spanish galleons would sail from Acapulco, Mexico, loaded with Mexican silver. They'd cross the Pacific Ocean, which took 3 to 4 months. They'd arrive in Manila. In Manila, that silver would be exchanged for Chinese silk, porcelain, spices, and luxury goods that Chinese merchants brought to the Philippines. Then the galleons would sail back to Acapulco with Chinese goods. From Acapulco, those goods would be sent to Spain. Spain would sell them in Europe for massive profits, and the cycle would repeat every year for 250 years. This was the most profitable trade route in the world, more profitable than the Spanish silver fleets from South America, more profitable than the Dutch spice trade, more profitable than anything, and it all ran through Manila. But here's what they don't teach. Manila wasn't just a stop on the route. Manila was the engine, and Filipinos were the ones making it run. Now let me show you exactly what Filipinos did to make Spain rich, and what Spain did to Filipinos in return. Because what Spain forced Filipinos to do to keep this trade running is one of the darkest parts of colonial history. And it's a system that most people have never heard of. It was called Polo y Servicios, and it was essentially slavery. The Manila galleons weren't built in Spain. They were built in the Philippines, in shipyards in Cavite, just outside Manila. And they were built entirely by Filipino labor. These weren't small ships. Manila galleons were some of the largest wooden ships ever constructed, up to 2,000 tons, 150 feet long. They required thousands of trees, hundreds of workers, years to build, and Spain forced Filipinos to build them. The system was called Polo y Servicios, forced labor. Every Filipino male between the ages of 16 and 60 had to provide 40 days of unpaid labor per year to the Spanish colonial government. 40 days. That's almost 2 months. Most of that labor went to building galleons, maintaining ports, cutting timber, and producing supplies for the trade. But here's the reality. 40 days was the rule. The practice was much worse. Spanish officials would extend the service to 80 days, 100 days, sometimes the entire year. And if you refused, you were punished. Fines, imprisonment, beatings, sometimes execution. And you weren't just building ships, you were sailing them. Filipino sailors were the backbone of the galleon fleet. Spanish sailors didn't know the Pacific. Filipinos did. Filipinos knew the winds, the currents, the storms. Spanish captains relied on Filipino pilots to navigate, Filipino crew to operate the ships, and those voyages were deadly. The Pacific crossing took 3 to 4 months. Ships were overcrowded, food ran out, water ran out. Scurvy killed sailors by the dozens. Storms sank entire galleons. Pirates attacked. Of the ships that left Manila, 15 to 20% never made it to Acapulco. And when a galleon sank, the crew drowned. Most of them Filipino. Between 1565 and 1815, hundreds of galleons sailed. Thousands of Filipinos died building them, thousands more died sailing them. And for what? Spain paid Filipino workers almost nothing, sometimes literally nothing. But let's talk about the cargo those Filipinos were dying to transport. Because this is where the numbers get truly staggering. Because when you calculate how much wealth actually moved through Manila over 250 years, and you convert it to modern currency, the number is almost impossible to believe. But it's documented. Let me show you. Here's what we know from Spanish colonial records. Each Manila galleon could carry between 300,000 and 2 million silver pesos in cargo value per voyage. The average was around 1 million pesos per ship. From 1565 to 1815, Spain sent approximately 400 galleons across the Pacific. That's conservative. Some historians say closer to 600. 400 galleons times 1 million pesos average equals 400 million pesos total. Now, how much is that in today's money? Economic historians use different methods to convert historical currency. The most common method is based on silver content. 1 Spanish peso in the 1600s contained roughly 25 grams of silver. At today's silver prices, that's about $25 per peso. 400 million pesos times $25 equals $10 billion. That's based purely on the silver value. Third, the Catholic Church. The church owned vast estates in the Philippines, collected taxes from Filipinos, and controlled trade licenses. Church officials sent their wealth back to Spain. The Archbishop of Manila lived like a king. Filipino farmers starved, and the Filipinos who actually did the work, they were paid wages that were a fraction of what Spanish workers received, when they were paid at all. Filipino shipbuilders earned 1/10 of what Spanish shipbuilders in Mexico earned. Filipino sailors earned less than Spanish sailors. Filipino dock workers were often paid in food rations instead of money. And here's the cruelest part. The galleon trade didn't develop the Philippine economy. It destroyed it. Why? Because Spain forced Filipinos to work on galleons instead of farming. Every man conscripted into Polo y Servicios was a man not planting rice, not fishing, not producing for his own community. Regions near Manila, Cavite, and Laguna, where most of the shipbuilding happened, experienced food shortages because so many farmers were forced into shipyard labor. Filipinos were literally starving while building ships to make Spain rich. And when galleons needed supplies, Spanish officials would seize Filipino crops, timber, and resources. Without compensation, Filipinos called it requisitioning. It was theft. For 250 years, the Philippine economy existed to serve Spain, not to develop itself, not to benefit Filipinos, to extract wealth and send it to Madrid. Now compare this to other colonial systems. The British in India built railroads, ports, and administrative systems. Exploitative, yes, but they left infrastructure. The Dutch in Indonesia built agricultural systems that, while brutal, created some local economic development. Spain in the Philippines? They built churches. And that's about it. When Spain left in 1898, the Philippines had almost no roads, no railways, no industrial base, and an economy entirely dependent on exporting raw materials. The galleon trade made Spain rich and kept the Philippines poor by design. And Spain has never acknowledged this, never apologized, never offered compensation. Let me show you why that matters today. Because the wealth that Spain extracted from the Philippines isn't just history, it's the reason the Philippines is still struggling today. And here's the calculation that Spain doesn't want anyone to make. Let's do some simple math. If Spain took between $35 billion and $500 billion from the Philippines over 250 years, and we use the mid-range estimate of $200 billion, what would that money be worth today if it had stayed in the Philippines and been invested? Economic growth rates vary, but let's use a conservative 3% annual return. If $200 billion had been invested in Philippine development, starting in 1815, when the galleon trade ended, and compounded for 210 years, it would be worth approximately $400 billion today. That's more than the Philippines' entire current GDP. Imagine if the Philippines had that wealth. Roads, schools, hospitals, industrialization, economic independence. The Philippines wouldn't be a developing nation. It would be one of the richest countries in Asia. But that's not what happened. Spain took the wealth. Spain used it to build palaces, fund wars, and enrich Spanish nobility. And when Spain finally left the Philippines in 1898, they left nothing behind but a colonial economy designed to extract, not to develop. And here's the kicker. Other countries have received reparations for colonial exploitation. Germany paid reparations to Israel for the Holocaust. Japan paid reparations to South Korea for colonial occupation. Britain paid reparations to Kenya for colonial abuses. Has Spain ever paid reparations to the Philippines? No. Has Spain ever apologized for 333 years of colonization? No. Has Spain ever acknowledged the wealth they extracted through the galleon trade? No. In fact, when the Philippines gained independence, Spain tried to claim that they had civilized the Philippines. They said colonization was a gift. They pointed to the churches they built and the Christianity they imposed as evidence of Spanish benevolence. They never mentioned the $500 billion they took. And most Filipinos today don't even know this happened, because this history isn't taught in schools. The galleon trade is mentioned briefly as a footnote. The economic scale of the exploitation, never discussed, but the effects are still here. The Philippines' lack of industrial base, the colonial mentality that still affects Filipino culture, the economic dependence on foreign powers that started with Spain and continues today. Spain built their golden age on Philippine labor, and the Philippines is still recovering from being the engine of someone else's empire. That's the legacy of the Manila Galleon Trade. That's the $500 billion theft that Spain will never acknowledge. And that's why this story needs to be told. So there it is, the complete story of the Manila Galleon Trade. 250 years, 400 million silver pesos, $500 billion in modern value, built by Filipino labor, sailed by Filipino sailors, extracted by Spain, and never returned.